Okay, I think we're ready. How does that feel?
Feels
Is
good.
it
Feels
nicer? Hope it's not too much wind. I'm gonna protect the mic from the wind. So we talk a lot about, or we hear a lot about your experiences and the wisdom nuggets that come with it and the beautiful advice that you're giving. I think what would be interesting is to know how did it feel when you started the work? Not necessarily what was the catalyst, but how did you feel in that moment when you decided to start the work?
the way that I felt in the moment before I started doing the work was I felt shattered. I felt lost, confused, and I couldn't really quite understand why my life felt like it was falling apart. And it was confusing because I'd lived a very good life up until that point, and but I didn't realize how much pain I'd suppressed. I didn't realize how disconnected I was from my emotions and feelings, and I had no idea how numb I actually was overall. And so when that all came into my reality, it was like getting hit by a ton of bricks. And I was seeing my actions and I was seeing how they were affecting people and I was seeing how it was destroying me. And I was very confronting. And the reason why I have trouble talking about my past is because I really stepped off the foot of joy and love and laughter and positivity and excitement. But when I look at it, I just didn't have the tools to be able to process discomfort. And I had so much like a backlog of discomfort that I hadn't even looked at from my childhood that that made it feel like I was that eventually something caught up with me. But really, for me, it was just a matter of not knowing or having the tools and being able to distinguish what I was experiencing on an emotional level. And like anything, like pressure or anything that just builds up over time, and eventually just like it becomes unbearable. You can't function. It's like imagine like you twist your ankle and it swells up, and it's like no, I can't walk, I can't move. It was like this. Um, and yeah, I mean it's painful when you see your actions are affecting people because the last thing you ever want to do is hurt somebody, and but also I was also hurting myself.
If there would be one piece of advice or something that you could say to that person back in time when you started to take the first steps, what message would you convey?
That what you're running from is not as big as what you think it is, and that all fundamentally all it is just you are disconnected from yourself. That's it. The pain, you're not going to relive the pain of the past. You're not going to relive those moments and those experiences. That's done. But what is not there and what you need to equip yourself with is different tools for you to be able to see and connect more to yourself. And really that's it. And that's ultimately what I've done in my life since then.
Was there something on that path, on that journey, that was especially difficult or stood out to you if you look back at it?
I mean, I don't, I always say this overnight success doesn't happen overnight. And it's not just one thing, and it might seem like it is, but that catalyst is a build up of a lot of little things. And so I just look back on my life and go, I felt discomfort for a very long time, but I didn't know how to express it. I didn't want to come off or be perceived in a certain way. I didn't know how to process it. I grew up with classic male conditioning and cultural conditioning of like, she'll be right, get over it kind of thing. And so I didn't even know where to turn or what to do or where to look. So yeah, there was a couple of moments where some more significant events happened, but the bigger picture was it'd been happening for a long time. It was just I didn't know how to open the windows and let fresh air in, basically. And so it just got stuffy and uncomfortable. And of course, like when you're uncomfortable or you're threatened, it's easy to just project. It's easy to blame and it's easy just to point, and it's very easy to think that it's somebody else or something else. And that's the part that when I look back and even when I share in these men's circles and even to clients, like it sounds like I talk a lot about like self and self care and self nourishment, and that's because it's true. But like I know what it's like in the beginning, and it's one of those things. It's just incredibly confusing. It's incredibly confusing to know what to do, and particularly if you've created or lived the life that you've really wanted to live, but you feel disconnected. Like you feel empty, you feel hollow, you feel sad, you feel lonely, you feel all of these things, and it's very confusing because you're like, I did everything I wanted to do, or in some people's cases, like I followed the path that everybody else wants you to follow, or society or culturally wants you to follow. But yet, why do I feel this way? And that's the thing. And the reason why I stopped and knew that I needed to change my approach is because I was like, this is not sustainable. And I think that's the thing for a lot of men. It's like they like have this misconception that you've got to like surrender everything. It's like they're in battle and they're going to stand there in the middle of a battle and just put down their armor and put down their weapon and just be like, and that's what it's going to feel like. But it's not really like that at all. It's it's like if you don't go take rest, you can't even face the battle anyway. Like you'll end up perishing regardless. And so it's it's just about like really looking at your situation and going, something doesn't feel right, and that's okay. How do I change this? And those little questions of like, what's happening? How do I change? What do I change? Invoking those little points of introspection means you start cracking open the door and you can start looking at it because I mean, how it's like when you go into a cupboard, you don't know what to throw out unless you start looking at the labels and what's past its use by date and where do I start this spring clean? Well, let's start by throwing out the things that are out of date.
Would you say for a lot of men or people that you've worked with in general,
Mm-hmm.
it's difficult to even start that step because, we have this maybe old programming of you gotta just push through, or it's ungrateful if you question what you have, or even thinking or like having that feeling of being too deep in, right? Have you experienced that before, or have you seen that within people that you've worked with? And if yes, how to get out of there? How to make the first step from such a position?
Mm. Yeah, it's really interesting because when it comes to anything tangible or logical, like say, let's just say challenges in business, it's like men are very good at just mapping it out and finding a solution. But when it comes to emotional, it's almost like the chicken or the egg, which comes first. Because if there is a laundry list of conditional conditions, limiting beliefs, personal beliefs, values, society, like all these, they're almost like they're their own little hurdles or walls before a person, you have to navigate through those before you can ask yourself the question of like, am I, is everything okay? Like, and so the craziest part about it is not just men, but a lot of people end up defending the wrong thing. They end up fighting a cause that is absolutely not serving them. But they think that it is because it's been ingrained or indoctrinated or made they've been made to believe that that's the thing that's protecting them. And so it's like somebody going into battle with their army and then turning around and or getting confused and then turning around and like fighting their own men. And it's like it doesn't make sense because it's in and so that's why particularly for men, unfortunately a lot of guys have to be down in their luck to even ask the questions, ask the deeper questions. But that's the thing, because like if let's just say the prime example is asking for help is a weakness, then how do you even know, and at what point do you even need even just a little bit of help? Because if you think it's a weakness, you don't even look at all. So guess what? It gets to the point where things are so bad that it's so obvious that somebody needs help. And that's the thing. A lot of guys, including myself back then, didn't know. I didn't know my limits, physically, mentally, emotionally. You just keep going, because you think that's what's required of you. You think that's what society asks of you. That's what the role you have to play. All of these things. It's like this stoicism, but it's it's like for what? And realistically, like people just haven't been shown or taught or guided to be like, you've got to do the inventory. You've got to put, as I always say, put the oil in the car. You've got to do the maintenance. Like that's what creates sustainability. And the craziest part about it is because the most successful people I've ever met in my whole entire life are successful because of one common thing: their willingness to learn. And that is what literally separates somebody who creates success in their life and somebody who perishes and dies by their own sword. Is because a person, whether it's in business, relationships, financial, whatever it may be, that willingness to learn, that willingness to be a little bit curious is what can save somebody's life. And what saves potentially a marriage, a relationship with their children, their business, their company, whatever it may be, because it's like, wait a minute, I'm putting my hand up and saying I don't have the answers. All I need to know that something doesn't feel right. That's it. And where can I outsource and receive help and guidance to be able to understand this better? And that curiosity and that ability to learn and grow is what creates success. And the word success is just whatever you define it to be. But without that willingness and without taking that step of introspection, one will never create success. Doesn't matter what it is.
When walking this path with your clients, but also on your own path, what is something that, except curiosity, except willingness to learn, what else does it need?
Physically or emotionally?
I would say more, I mean, physically, it's time, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
right? Taking time, putting time aside to work, but emotionally, yes. How, I mean, I guess one would never feel completely ready to open
Mm.
that box, right? So, what does it take?
Well, see, this is the chicken or the egg, because how do you give yourself what you need if you don't even know what you need? And that's the whole thing. And a lot of guys I work with, and myself included, was if you asked me 8 years ago, man, even 5 years ago, what do you need? Emotion. I wouldn't know how to answer it. I wouldn't know what that really meant, and I at that point would have never have taken the time to have gotten to know what that looked like. And so it's very hard to know, to be able to give yourself what you need emotionally if you have no idea what that looks like. And I always put it in the context of practice, like, and learning to do something takes repetition, but it's like it builds up. One becomes confident through practicing something over and over. That's what builds confidence. And when you take that first step of introspection, being like, what is it do I think I need? Then start opening that door. So this is where we kind of get to the bottleneck for a lot of men, because it's so personally vulnerable, because it's embarrassing, to be honest. When you're an adult standing there and somebody asks, what do you need emotionally? You can feel like an idiot because you're like, I don't know. I've got no idea. And it's even hard saying those words for a lot of guys. So compassion is one of the number one pillars, because it's like anything. If you have a young child who's trying to learn something, and you can take the tough love approach, and they might be able to learn it, but what's the lasting results going to be like? They're going to think that every time they learn something, it has to be tough. But if you take that same child, the same example, but you show compassion and understanding and consideration, then they're going to take that as a sign that when I ask for help, this is what is I receive. And so it's the same thing with your own personal journey. You can beat yourself up over it, but it doesn't matter whatever your destination is, it will feel like a harder road to get there. And when you get there, it doesn't even feel that nice, because you're going to look back and think of all the things you could have done better. But if you arrive on the path of compassion, the outcome doesn't matter, because you've enjoyed the journey. And even if you made a couple of wrong turns, you're not going to beat yourself up over it. So it's like, ultimately, what you need at the beginning is what you develop on the road. But you have to be open to receive that tool at the start. And receiving that tool of compassion is deeply confronting for a lot of men. They don't know how to handle it. They don't know how to hold it. They don't know how to use it. They don't know how to do anything with it. They might never have been shown it. It might not have been a tool that was ever in tool shed. And so that's where people don't want to pick it up. They feel it's too scary. It's too much. And of course, like, if and even if you feel you can use it, if you don't feel worthy enough to use that tool, then you won't. So it's the personal limitations that stop men from using the tools that are needed to walk the path to their own sovereignty.
How was that experience for yourself? Like, did you feel uncomfortable, or was it difficult for you to accept your own compassion, or even to build it, to come to nourish that?
Yeah, it was incredibly difficult. And to be honest, it didn't even happen. Now, I mean, like, look, I haven't drunk alcohol in over 7 years, and it took me 6 years to learn it. 5 years, 6 years to learn it, because I was still using what felt right and what felt comfortable. But and making that transition was huge for me, because it was like, I'm gonna arrive regardless, but I can arrive either really content within myself and actually nonchalant around the outcome, or I could arrive and do the analysis of what could have been better. And that's what I've been doing my whole life. That's what I was always seek perfection, thinking that that was going to be once I achieve that, then it would be I'd be validated with my worthiness. But nothing's perfect, so you're always going to find imperfections. And even if it was perfect and it was recognized, it still wasn't felt because I didn't believe it. And so I think that it got to a point where it was just exhaustion. And I was like, man, and it was kind of like its own realization. It's like, look at the way that I have to look at the way that I'm treating myself. And first it was like, quite, it was a negative inner critic. And then I ironed out the negativity and I kind of just got to a neutral space. And then the neutral space was showcasing, even though it was better than negative, it was showcasing that I still didn't know how to positively support myself, be proud of myself, care for myself, be kind to myself, and show that compassion and love and understanding. And that's the part, that's the next space is, and once I stepped into that, then I realized that I'm the one who actually has the agency. I have the choice because I'm the one who can lift myself up or I can push myself down. And that's a choice. And then once I acquired enough tools to be able to do that, then if I'm having a bad day, I lean on those tools. I use those tools. But it took so long to actually realize that I am the most important person. And if I don't treat myself with kindness and compassion, then nothing else really matters. Because I'll then just be looking for kindness and compassion outside of myself. And it's like when somebody gives you a compliment and you just deflect it or you just like this and that. And that's how it was for me for years, you know. I either deflected it or I didn't believe it. And because I had my self worth was low because that's just what I believed, right? And because I wasn't achieving, then I wasn't worthy, I wasn't flourishing.
It's very nice examples to put it into the picture because sometimes I feel like these things can sound very abstract, right? So that example with the compliment was very beautiful. And what would you say is a self practice of self compassion that you could share? Because it sounds also very abstract to me the first time I heard about it. It's like, oh, how does that look? How do you do that?
Mm. Well, first off, one needs to understand what they're saying in the original space. So, being aware of the narrative that comes through, is it, and what's the dialogue?
Mm.
Is it negative? Is it rude? Is it aggressive? Is it supportive? Is it understanding? What's that? When you do something and you don't do it to a standard that you wished you hope you had done it to, or that you have for yourself, then what words get said? What does it sound like in your mind? Like, as I said, do you beat yourself up or do you support yourself? And if you're the type of person who beats themselves up, then I would write that down. I would write down those words so you have a clear, tangible example of what you say to yourself.
Mm.
And then write next to it the opposite of that. And so every time that you now say that particular word, if it is negative, then you are the person who then changes it into a positive. And it sounds incredibly simple, but if you don't do that, then it will always remain negative. And by putting it in and saying the positive opposite of what that word is, you are challenging that belief. You are challenging that narrative and you are actually lowering its power. Because what it's saying is, I also have a voice and I'm also going to speak up. So it's, at the end of the day, this life is you versus you. And we have an incredible amount of conditioning, understanding and introspection of ourselves through the lives and exposures we've had. And really, it's like if you want to achieve something, it's if you don't succeed within that, or you feel threatened or upset or challenged to walk that path, then it's you standing in your own way. And it's very little that, because if there was something outside of you that was standing in your way, but you believe that you were meant to go to that destination or achieve that thing, you would find a way around it. But if you make an excuse for not going or not doing the thing, then it's you. Because if you really want something, you'll make it happen. And if you believe something, it will come true. So, writing the opposite of the negative or the narrative starts the process of rewiring, changing. Because then when you do that thing again and you hear that voice, you can recognize it for what it's saying. And then you go, wait a minute. And then the deeper work to that is understanding where that came from. And as I said, you don't have to relive the past. It's just showing curiosity. You're like, wow. Because what a lot of people don't realize is that negative voice in their head, it's not even them. It's the way that they've been spoken to.
Someone else.
So once you know that, then you realize by what you're actually doing by writing the opposite positive, that's you choosing. That's you writing it. And that's not somebody else's voice. This one's your voice. And so that is how you, and then you start being kind to yourself. And that's another important lesson that I learned when it came to compassion is understanding and being like, well, of course, I mean, all of these things happen because look at where I've come from. You know, of course, that makes sense. Like, and just being understanding. Once again, not beating yourself up, just going, well, yeah, it's okay. Like, we all, like, look at where you started. So, like, look at where you are now. It makes perfect sense. You know, just, I felt uncomfortable. I overthought a lot of things. So at the time, I love socializing. So going socializing and drinking beers was great. I stopped overthinking, you know. But I was an overthinker because I became incredibly hypervigilant because a particular chapter of my childhood was very unstable. So you're kind of like, oh, well, yeah, that all checks out. That makes sense. And now I don't drink. I don't really overthink, and I'm. It's great.
It's good.
Yeah, so it's just like, oh, okay.
Beautiful.
It's the craziest part of the craziest part about this whole thing is, and same with a lot of philosophies in life, is they're all very simple, but implementing them and practicing them is the hardest part. So people will hear me say things that sounds incredibly basic, but it has taken me years to get to that understanding and embodiment and knowing. And it's taken a lot of trials, tribulations, breakups, breakdowns. You know, it has, and it's like that thing when you get to a point and it's like it's something that somebody does just looks effortless. And when people just see the effortlessness, they also don't see what it took and how much practice it took to become effortless. That's the thing. And that's a journey that I felt called to do. This isn't like, I never thought I'd end up here doing the work that I'm doing. In fact, living the life that I've lived, but I felt very called to walk this path, to learn more about myself. And that part I can't explain. I don't know why, but I just wanted to know more. And it's like when I studied to be a therapist, it was easy because I just understood it. I just got it. For anybody out there who's studied something, learned something that they love or they just connect with, it doesn't feel like studying.
It comes easy.
It comes easy. And I never had many things that came easy. I mean, cutting hair was easy. But when it came to like studying, like in school, nothing came easy. And studying to be a therapist did. So can't explain it. It's
Just your calling.
yeah, well, I just get it. Like I get it because I've lived my and walked my own path, and I get it because I've studied it as well. So, as we've said before, like I actually struggle going back and talking about the past because I had so many amazing years and experiences, and I'm fortunate to travel the world so many times over and live in so many different parts of Australia, play music, connect with people. Like just my life has been phenomenal. It's been insane, but I've been driven, and I've wanted to keep going. And it's hard because I leveraged off the pain that I experienced, but it created the life that I always wanted. But it did get to a point where I felt bad, like I my felt like my luck ran out. But I realized my cup just empty, and I didn't have any kindness or love for myself, and I felt worthless. And that worthless feeling I'd felt since I was a kid, but it was just a small hole in the bucket, and eventually the bucket emptied, and I was dry, like completely dry. And I remember looking at him, I'm like, normally I got out of any situation that I would find myself in, I could get myself out, and I've dodged a lot of bullets. But I remember thinking to myself, "You're in too deep here. Like you can't go. Like you can't just get out of this one. It's not like the rest.
Mm. To do something.
You got to do something." And I wanted to change. I had this moment in my life when I was in Amsterdam, and I saw my life with alcohol in it, and I saw it without. And just for context, like I didn't even drink every day. I was actually afraid of alcohol. When you see and experience the dark side of alcohol through somebody else's actions, it doesn't leave a very good mark on me. And it scared me. And so I wasn't even the person who drank every day. But I saw the path that I was going down. And my and I saw my relationship with myself worsen, and things were getting worse within myself. So that amplification of fear and what I saw is what made me choose the path that I'm on. And I had a clear moment where I saw my life with alcohol and I saw my life without it. And the moment I saw that, I made the decision. And for me, and I'm going to say this lightly, but it's my truth, that it was easy because once I made it, there was no turning back. Because my biggest fear was turning out like my dad, and the number one guarantee that that would never happen is by not drinking. So
it was a no-brainer.
Huh?
It was a no-brainer.
It was a no-brainer. So I felt more relieved by doing it than not doing it.
Mm.
And as I said, like my old man was like 35 years older than me. And the moment that I made that decision, I felt like I was in Mario Kart and I just got leveled up 35 lives. You know, I honestly felt like I just feel like I've gained 35 years of my life. Like something my father wasn't able to do. So everything just compounded in a positive way. And once I'd taken that step, and this is the thing, and I'll say this to everybody out there, like, as I said before, the chicken or the egg, but once you take that first step, even if it's a tiny little step in the right direction, a tiny step of introspection, a tiny little bit of curiosity, or just talking to the right person, that's what, once that gains traction, it just snowballs and it just goes. Like I see guys come to the men's circle apprehensively, but take that step and it's their mind is just blown. And then they're talking about, they miss a week and they're shattered because they're like, I wanted to be there, I want to be a part of this, like, and they see how valuable it is. Because the irony out of the whole thing for men is that if men have a space to communicate the reality of their experience, 9 times out of 10 they will solve or resolve the issue within themselves just by hearing them speak it. But through cultural conditioning and because of societal conditioning, men don't have those spaces, like true authentic spaces. But the magic I see every week is just by allowing the space for people to be honest within themselves.
Mm.
And the moment they are is the moment things start to change. And that's it, because we're not meant to carry all of this stuff around. Life is hard, man. Life is hard. It's complicated. Like, and it's nothing's what it seems. Even if you think somebody's living the perfect life, nothing's what it seems.
Never.
Life is hard. We're all learning our own lessons. We all have different teachers, and it's not normal or even possible to think that somebody can, as a human being, can carry all that emotional weight. Like, it's just, it's like the machine's gonna blow up. It does. Unfortunately, yeah, it does. Like, and the worst case scenario, people take their lives. You know, and that's not a small problem, particularly in a country like Australia. You know, like, I mean, hell, my dad did it. So it's like, but just by sharing the reality of your experience, even in the smallest way, actually gives yourself a break and reminds
Takes a
you,
load off.
takes a load of it, reminds you, like, man, you know what, I'm a human too. Like, and yeah, we've all got our challenges. So that's what I say. Like, it sounds easy, but I know how hard that first step is. But taking it changes your life. I'm living proof of
Thank you so much for sharing. Also for sharing a little bit of the tools.
that.
And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I think it's like, you and I have spoken a lot about this, and it's hard, and particularly on like a social media realm, and what to share and how to share it and who to share it with and bits and pieces. And I mean, I see some unbelievable results in a very short amount of time with the men that I work with. Because when you step into a container, you can unpack it. It's safe, mm, and it's supportive. And the moment that a person, particularly men, feel safe, it's amazing how quickly they open up and things can change. But as I said, I don't like talking about my past because I'm so grateful for it and I had such an incredible experience. But I will in the future begin to speak more about how I was feeling at those times and share, because I was in a dark place and I was in a lot of loneliness and insecurity, and I was ultimately became a shell of the person I was because as I said, I ran dry. So I'm going to be sharing more about that. So because once again, once men realize that they're not alone, then and you realize that your challenge is a lot more common than what you might think, then it's the first step of also receiving support. You're like, oh, I'm not alone, and you never were. You just feel that you are. So
Because it's easy to feel isolated these days, even though we're all somehow connected over social media. It's a tricky one.
yeah, and it's also easy to feel isolated when you don't allow yourself or believe that you can talk to anybody
Mm.
because you're doing the wrong thing. So it's one of those ones where you're going to make it worse for yourself
Mm.
because that's not the reality. You think it is, and that's the thing. You got to. That's just conditioning. It's just pattern behavior. That's what it is. That's why, like, yeah, it's it's simple and hard at the same time. And I've got a lot of patience. So I encourage anybody to just find their person, people, communities, groups, online, videos, anything you can. Just like lean in and you know give yourself the break that you deserve.
Mm. Beautiful. Stay tuned for more stories and more tools.